Filippo Ganna is for many cycling connoisseurs one of the best riders in the world, not only for his abilities as a time trialist, but also for his enormous qualities to climb mountain passes with not too difficult ramps, as he demonstrated in the Giro d'Italia in 2020. However, 2 years earlier he was humiliated in one of these Argentinian mountain passes by a rider who at the time few believed, and who months later tested positive for Sira in an absolutely regrettable manner. This is the story of Gonzalo Najar, the Condor from Jujuy. Do you want to hear about it? Without further ado, let the show begin. Gonzalo Najar took the step to professionalism in 2015, in the team of the Sindicato de Empleados Públicos de San Juan, sponsored by the Trade Union of Public Employees in the South American province, an Argentinian team that aimed to bring to the top of international cycling a country with a tradition in the sport, but with very little extension outside its borders. After minor successes such as stage wins in the Vuelta a Mendoza and in the Doble Calingasta, as well known as the Giro del Capo, in which Christopher Froome swept the plaudits when he was still Kenyan, Najar took the big leap forward in 2017. In that year, during the 106th Argentinian Road Championships, Gonzalo Najar beat the almighty Gabriel Richard and Juan Javier Melvino to become national champion after an attack from distance on the San Luis circuit. This was the first sign that Najar wanted to eat the world for breakfast, and even more so when a go-getter like him saw the gates of heaven open up for him, by way of interviews in local newspapers and newscasts in his home province of Jujuy in the north of Argentina. So, for the 2018 season, he made a stealth preparation with his SEP teammates. He knew that this year he could break it, and he had a clear objective: to make the leap to international fame with the prestigious Vuelta San Juan, the only competition held in Argentina with the presence of World Tour teams and first world-class competitors. To do so, he decided to prepare himself in the Vuelta Ciclista a Mendoza, where the Condor of Jujuy and his SEP teammates literally swept the rest of the riders. On the first day, several of his teammates broke the pack, and Najar won, ahead of one of his gregarios, making it clear that he was going to go all out in this competition. His teammate Daniel Diaz broke away in one of the stages and got a big advantage, but Najar was not intimidated, and in a time trial in Vicencio showed new super conditions that no one knew that he had. With his unique style, without getting out of the saddle, our Condor won ahead of Diaz, and more than a minute and a half ahead of the third classified Ismael Laguna. With such a performance, he confirmed that he was more than a sprinter or a climber. He was becoming the total Argentinian cyclist. The Maradona of cycling, you might say. And he would confirm it 2 days later on the tremendous climb to Cristo Redentor in Mendoza. A 10-kilometer pass full of dust and cows, as you can see in the images, that could pass for a goat track, but that leaves us some reminders and a sample of everything that still has to improve the competitions in some areas of the planet. The Ecuadorian Sebastián Rodríguez, perhaps imbued by the spirit of Don Pedro, his father who won there in 1995, achieved a victory in the snowy summit. But Najar knew how to regulate like a champion and arrive in second place. Najar finished runner-up to his SEP teammate Daniel Diaz and was rubbing his hands together ahead of the impending Vuelta a San Juan. He went to a high-altitude training camp in the province and got the big stuff in his veins. The preparation was done. Now was the time to confirm that he was the next great hope of Argentina at the world level. The government of San Juan was preparing for the event of the year in the province. Several World Tour teams, such as Movistar, Quickstep and Lotto Soudal, were arriving in Argentina to start their season, while the America Tour teams were at the height of their campaign. Bahrain Merida's Vincenzo Nibali was welcomed as little more than a demigod at the San Juan airport, and the Transalpine star promised war. But with the route proposed by the organisation, he would only have one chance: the day of the climb to the Alto del Colorado. A very long 23-kilometre pass with an average gradient of 3.9%. Before that, the other key stage was a time trial of only 15 kilometres in the city of San Juan. That day, Trek's Irishman Ryan Mullen made the most of his time trial skills, and he beat the then young Italian from the UAE team, Filippo Ganna, by 25 seconds, and Team Medellin Spaniard Oscar Sevilla, who, younger than ever at the age of 40, was 36 seconds short of glory. But where was our protagonist of today, Gonzalo Najar? His teammates Juan Pablo Dotti and Daniel Diaz had overtaken him, and he had to settle for a discreet 36th place, more than a minute and a half behind the winner, and being on par with riders who were not at all skilled against the clock, like Garcia Cortina and Dyer Quintana. So, only one bullet was missing: the aforementioned Alto del Colorado stage. Everything seemed to be against him, since on that summer day the wind was blowing a headwind, and with such shallow ramps, the watts that the rider would have to produce to win the stage would need to be Martian if he wanted to win alone. Well, that day Gonzalo Najar took all the favadas and the chinchaling that he needed to become not a Condor, but a jet plane. And as if it weren't enough for him, and without leaving the saddle, he began to take advantage from almost straight away on the first ramps of the Alto. 18 kilometres still from the finish line. El Pibe was more on fire than Carlos Saúl Menem on the day that he decided to equalise the Argentinian peso with the dollar. His cadence was so brutal that cyclists like Remy Cavagna, Harlinson Pantano, Rafael Maica, Fausto Masnada and Darwin Atapuma were falling off trying to keep up with the pace of the Argentinian hero of the public employees. The advantage, surprisingly, was growing as the kilometres went by, and Najar's face barely showing signs of fatigue. A group that included Oscar Sevilla, Filippo Ganna and Tish Benoot was losing more and more time to an Argentinian who could not believe what he was experiencing. Minutes later, he crossed the finish line as the winner in a manner exploding with surplus energy that continued lasting for hundreds of metres after winning, which even led to suspicions that the young rider of 25 years used a motor on his bike. 2 minutes behind was the boyish Oscar Sevilla, and Filippo Ganna, the same rider who would become world champion a year later, 2.5 minutes behind. Najar's surplus was so great that the riders were passing the line almost one by one, making legendary differences for a pass with a relatively low average gradient. His director, Sergio Gili, former coach of Chile, had been the architect of such a work of art. According to him, Najar had to attack from afar if he wanted to win, since his previous victories in Mendoza and in the Argentinian Championships had been like that, and that he had promised the overall victory to the team owner. Gonzalo Najar was thus crowned the clear winner of the Vuelta San Juan, and his name was already being mentioned by European teams. But there was a certain aura of disbelief in such an uncontested triumph. In Jujuy he was received as a hero, and Najar's facial expressions said a lot without even opening his mouth. He had doped himself to get that recognition, to pull himself out of misery and become a superstar in his country. They started calling him up for TV shows. It was even rumoured that he might be dating one of the weather girls who proved so popular with Argentinian teenagers, and his future looked bright. But less than a year later, the whole truth came out. Gonzalo Najar and other SEP teammates had injected third-generation EPO into their veins, with rudimentary and botched methods. He was sentenced to 4 years of sanction that ruled him out of competition until May 2022. So presumably soon we will see him on the roads, and we will all remember his story. That of the doped Condor who one day left the world champion Filippo Ganna, and the real winner of that Vuelta San Juan, the always clean Oscar Sevilla, breathless. Because little birds like Najar can be sanctioned, so that we know that the anti-doping controls are good for something.